Big Pit Mining Museum is located high in the Welsh Valleys, at the heart of the Blenavon World Heritage Site. In 2005, the Big Pit won the Gulbenkian Museum of the Year award. We visited the day after the award was announced.
Yes, it was a great night, and we've walked away with a very nice glass bowl, a slate plaque to screw on the wall, and £100,000. So it was a very good night indeed.
Created as a living history museum in 1980, Big Pit is one of only 3 deep mines in Europe open to the public. The museum can cater for the visually and hearing impaired as well as wheelchair users. Visitors are able to tour the workings with a former miner as a guide. This award will allow the museum to further develop its educational resources. Once there were over 1,500 working mines in South Wales. Today there are just 2 deep pits. Although industrial history is the museum's main educational focus, the mine also explores other curricular areas in geography, science and citizenship. 50 miles away in Bristol, the very real risks of a visit to the pit are being spelled out.
And one of the things which is really important on going on trips is to think about health and safety, and I have to do a risk assessment before we leave.
Paul Everington is the programme leader for history at City Academy Bristol, an inner city school. He's preparing a Key Stage 3 group for the trip.
What would your parents be worried about for you going down the mine?
Hurting yourself.
Hurting yourself, can you?
Wearing suitable clothes and shoes.
Suitable clothes and suitable shoes, very important, especially if we're going down the mine. It's very dirty, it's a bit wet.
Like rocky surfaces.
Rocky surfaces you might trip over.
Some on you.
Yeah, well, that's the whole place falling in on you. Yeah. Absolutely, you never know, it might fall in on you. But it's loads and different problems that we might encounter. And the one thing you haven't mentioned is also actually getting there, going on the coach. You need to make sure you're getting on and get off the coach. Health and safety is a very important issue when we're going on educational visit. And in the case of the Big Pit, it's especially important because it's a very dangerous environment. There are lots of uneven surfaces, there's lots of potential problems. And so it's very important that the children are aware of some of those potential problems before we go. But what makes you surprised? Anything surprise you?
That she's 8 and she's working down in the pits.
Perfect. That she's 8 years old. I think it's good for learning to be more active, to be more real. And with history, it's great because you can actually start to touch the past. You can actually really be in contact with the past. And I think that's a great factor for history especially. And lastly, I think it's a good opportunity to enrich children's education and to make it fun. Obviously, children are out of their normal teaching and learning environment, and so there's more potential for problems to occur. It's a different social context, so they are interacting with each other in a slightly different kind of way, and they're always really positive. And some people go, "Oh, I can't take that child out because they're going to be a nightmare." But when they actually go out of the school, they're much better in an out-of-school context than they are sometimes in the school. And I think we should have, make sure that we give everybody the opportunity to do that.
Going to the Big Pit is a really unique experience that you can only get in a few places nowadays. So you can go to industrial sites like Beamish or Ironbridge, but to be able to go to an industrial site and actually go down into the pit and see how the miners worked is really extraordinary.
Going down the pit is available to anyone over a metre tall. The first place to visit is the pit head, where pupils are kitted out prior to going down into the mine.
Where are you from? Where? Well, Bangladesh. Never.
It's very much a living history museum. Well, the best resource we have at Big Pit is actually the staff, particularly the guiding staff, who are all ex-miners. So obviously they've all worked within the industry. They've had many different experiences of the industry.
Hold your hands out. What's your name?
What is exceptional about the Big Pit experience was that the children were able to talk to ex-miners. That, of course, is a really important source of evidence for children studying history. The oral tradition means that they can begin to think about what they learnt from talking to the miners and compare it with what they learned from looking at books or talking to their teachers.
Contraband is, first of all, if you have any smoking material on you. It doesn't matter about the teachers. You've got any fags or matches, lighters on you, you're not allowed underground, definitely. Also, secondly now, anything containing a dry cell battery. Watches.
Dangers of gas in the ground is methane gas. If you think back to 1913, a little place called Singennydd, used to be a mine down in Caerphilly, all right? An explosion there, 439 miners killed because of a methane gas explosion. That's how dangerous it is to take batteries and cameras and things like this underground. And that's the reasoning behind it.
Now, just one rule. When I'm talking, please be quiet. You do that for me?
The lift cage will take the children over 300 feet underground.
We were travelling down at 2 metres per second.
2 metres?
2 metres per second. And when it was a working mine, it was 6 metres per second. A lot faster.
I think it's a remarkable thing that when the children go down, you know, they're able to see the workplace for themselves and to get an idea of what it must have been like to work in such a place and in such conditions. So they can empathise with what these miners went through, I think.
For 12 hours a day and 6 days a week, Mitchell's job is opening and closing the doors. Mitchell is in charge of the ventilation. As long as the doors are kept shut, the ventilation will take its proper course around the mine. His father brought him to work this morning around about 6 o'clock. He said to Mitchell, "You sit there, Mitchell, you listen for the trams." And by the way, Mitchell didn't have a light. He sometimes had a candle if his family could afford it.
I think the thing that really attracts the children to go into Big Pit is the opportunity to put their helmets on, their flashlights and their battery packs, and to actually go underground.
Just shut your lights off for just a couple of seconds, and then you can appreciate...
And we've always had the opportunity to turn off the lamps, and everybody's turned off the lamps at the same time, and it's been absolutely pitch black. And the children get a real sense of what it was like to maybe be a trapper underground with absolutely no light. And it brings it much more to life. And to see the machinery and to see the way that people used to mine, the actual environment, it brings it much more to life.
The most number of horses we had was 72. 72. We had 3 stables. Now this is the shaft that goes around the horse's body, and this is the gun that's connected to the tram. Now our little horse, Matt, in his short working career would pull thousands of tons of coal. Let me tell you a little thing about Matt. Matt was born on a farm in Blaenavon, and when he was 4 years of age, he was brought to the mine. But little did Matt know, this is where he was going to spend the rest of his life. He lived underground until he was about 14, 15, 16 years of age. And by this time, the dust has got onto his lungs. Matt was taken out and destroyed. As you were walking round, I don't know whether you noticed that there isn't any toilets. Now, when we were working here, we had our food where we worked.
Yeah.
So, obvious, you went to the toilet where you worked.
Oh. No.
That's disgusting.
What, so it's around here? Oh.
Anywhere.
Oh! No, tell us.
That's all very nice.
The smells was pretty atrocious. But of course, that was coal mining. Between the sweat that smelled,
Oh my God.
where he went to the loo smelled, it was a pretty nasty place to be working for 8 and 10 hours a day, especially when there were 500 men underground.
Back above ground, the school visit continues to the museum gallery, where an interactive display gives further insight into our industrial heritage.
Siding like Boadicea's chariot along the coal face.
It's quite a rich site in terms of the experiences that you can get here. And I think it's unique in the approach we've taken to some of the controversial issues of mining. If you think of mining, it is full of controversy. So the nice, safe way to deal with that is to take the neutral, middle-of-the-road approach and not risk upsetting anyone. Well, we decided not to do that. And what we do is show people the extremes of the arguments and let people make their own minds up. So it challenges people and actually engages people in that controversy.
Although industrial archaeology is the main purpose of the museum, the exhibits and galleries also explore other subject areas, especially those of citizenship and geology.
Purely from a geographical perspective, it's quite good because we study settlement and why towns grow up and villages, and the impact on the landscape is really good. However, there's masses and masses of writing, and I can see that our kids are walking around looking at all the visual images and not really reading loads of the interesting things on the captions.
It's our job to cater for people of all sorts of educational needs, ages, people of the third age as well, not just young children. So anybody really who wants to learn something about this industry, and that's our job, is to make it accessible and allow them to learn in a whole variety of ways.
The children who went to the Big Pit were going there to study history and geography. So they were already making links between two very different subjects that they're studying at school. But clearly they were doing other things as well. They were talking to the miners about how they lived, and then they were thinking about how things have changed, really in a very short space of time. So there were some important issues being raised about citizenship, about people's roles, about change, about politics. And one of the things that the museum says is that they like to challenge people's preconceptions and views and make them think about the issues.
When we went down the pit, I thought that how it would be for the miners who were down there years ago. Because it is so dark, and all they had was a little light on their helmet and all the dust going into their lungs.
I didn't really have a best bit. I found all of it really, really good.
The ex-miner had first-hand experience, so I reckon that was good, because otherwise it could have been just someone else just saying how he thought things were going.
It was a new experience for us, part of history, and if you're into history, you would like to go and see it. I was fascinated.
I think the most important thing to remember about school trips is that when you've left school, all your teachers have forgotten, but you more than likely will remember one of your school trips that you went on. And I think that's a really important point, and we must not forget that they're fun and they enrich our experience of life.